Greetings from Geneva. It's a great pleasure to be able to join you today, even if it is electronically, for this important meeting in Sharjah. I'm going to talk to you today about some of the recent developments on ageing globally. And I think you can see the importance of this issue when you look at this map of the world. So this is a map of the world today, and it shows the proportion of the population over the age of 60 in different countries. What you will see is only one country in the world is of the darkest colour, and that is Japan. But if we move to the middle of the century, you'll see just how dramatically populations change. And you will see that even for countries like the UAE, ageing is a particularly important issue. Now, looking at these maps is very useful as a way of getting people interested in the topic, but it's not a very good place to start if you want to think about what to do. And particularly because a map like this suggests that everybody over the age of 60 is the same, and we know they're not. We know that some 80-year-olds retain the same health and vigour as a 20-year-old, whereas many people in their 60s are in much poorer health and need significant care and support. So in trying to move the agenda forward on a global response to population ageing, WHO has tried to reframe the concept of healthy ageing in a way that can be relevant for that great diversity of older people. In the World Report on Ageing and Health, which was released last year at about the same time as the last meeting that you held, we redefined healthy ageing as the process of developing and maintaining the functional ability that enables well-being in older age. And I thought I'd just take a little bit of time to try to really clarify two important concepts that are nested in that definition. So if we think about this functional ability that enables well-being in older age, what is it? If you think about an elderly couple, part of their functional ability is determined by their intrinsic capacity, the mental capacity, the physical capacity that you see in the person in front of you. But anybody wants to sit down, they need a chair. For many of us, if we want to read, we need glasses. And for other people who have lost some physical capacity, to get where they need to go, it's much easier if there is disabled access public transport. And so the functional ability that enables them to do the things that are important to them is not just about their intrinsic capacity, it's also about the environment in which they live. And so this definition of functional ability which we use is the intrinsic capacity of the individual, the environment they live in, and the interaction between those two things. Now, if you think of any older population and you think about these two things, functional ability and intrinsic capacity, across people's lives, you will find that generally that there are people within that population in three different phases. There are people who have high and stable capacity, there are people who have declining capacity, and there are people with significant losses of capacity. And the policies and the responses we need to put in place to address population ageing is different for each of these population groups. So for people with high and stable capacity, that is people who are physically vigorous and who still have good mental capacity, the issue here is to prevent disease. This is where it's particularly important that people don't smoke, that they eat well, that they are physically active, and that we identify diseases early so we can cure them. And health systems are pretty well set up to do those things now. But when capacity starts to decline, and often for people over the age of 65, this is reflected in people having more than one condition. So the majority of people over the age of 65 actually have more than one health problem and are starting to experience a decline in capacity. Here, the role of the health system has to change. And this is what services don't tend to do so well these days. Here, health systems need to provide much more integrated care of complex conditions, care that's coordinated and not just designed to respond to individual conditions separately. This is also a period where the role of the environment becomes particularly important, because if we have a supportive environment, then it can help people compensate for losses of capacity. The final group in any older population will have had significant losses of capacity. And these are people who need care and support. They also need ongoing healthcare, but they also need broader care which allows them to live lives of meaning and dignity, and we call this long-term care. In many countries, there's not much long-term care available, and there's a reliance on families. But as we see more and more older people, that will be much harder to sustain because there just won't be enough young people to look after them at home, and certainly not without the sort of support that they need. And so we call on countries around the world to develop systems of long-term care, not in institutions, but systems of long-term care that can allow older people to be cared for at home, but which can provide support for families to do that. Now, this way of thinking, which was released last year in the World Report, is reflected in the Global Strategy and Action Plan, which was adopted by WHO's member states earlier this year. And so the Global Strategy and Action Plan calls for 5 strategic actions. The first one is commitment to action in every country. And as I say, every one of WHO's member states, including the UAE, has signed off to this. And part of that commitment needs to be changing the way we think about aging and what it is to be an older person. So one of the things in the resolution that accompanied the global strategy that member states called for was a global campaign to combat ageism, to combat discrimination on the basis of age. And so we would be very keen in working with Sharjah in trying to think how that might be relevant to your own setting. The next strategic objective of the global strategy is around ensuring that every older person has the opportunity to age in an age-friendly environment. That's an environment that can help them maintain their capacity, that allows them to continue to be physically active and engaged, but it's also an environment that can help them compensate for losses of capacity. So again, if there's disabled access public transport or disabled access buildings or training for older people so they can retain their skills, these are things which can allow them to compensate for losses in physical and even mental capacity. The third strategic objective is to realign health systems so they meet the needs of older populations. And as I described before, that requires developing systems which can deliver older person-centred and integrated care. The fourth strategic objective is calling for every country in the world to develop a sustainable and equitable system for long-term care. And that care could be provided in the home, it could be provided in people's communities, and it could be provided in institutions, but there needs to be an appropriate balance between them. And finally, the global strategy calls for much better measurement, monitoring and research on healthy ageing. Now, this may sound like a very ambitious agenda, and people often ask, well, how can we afford it? Won't this cost too much? And at WHO, we've actually been trying to think about what expenditure on older populations mean. And to start with, I think we need to reject this idea that this expenditure is just a cost. So expenditure on health systems, long-term care systems, lifelong learning, those sorts of things, is much better reframed as an investment. And if you make an investment, you expect a dividend, you expect a return on that investment. And what you want to do is make sure you get the best possible return. So the investment from these expenditures gives a return for the individual in terms of their health. If you invest in health systems, you presume that it makes people healthier. Investing in lifelong learning helps older people retain skills and knowledge, and investing in long-term care gives them security and allows them to live lives of meaning and dignity. But the return on that investment is also true for society. So if we do these things for individual, it enables individual well-being, but it also allows older people to remain in the workforce, it allows them to continue to consume, it allows them to continue to be entrepreneurs, and sometimes it surprises people that some of the most successful entrepreneurs are actually older people. And so there are many benefits of these investments, both for the individual and for society. And perhaps the most important of all is the one right down in the bottom right-hand corner here, which is social cohesion. Because all of this investment in ageing populations is an investment in sustainable development, in creating fair, cohesive and equitable societies that are societies for everybody of all ages within them. So I'm very happy to see Sharjah placing such an emphasis on responding to older populations. And I'm sorry again that I can't be there in person, but I wish you all the best with this meeting. If you want some more information on the things I've spoken about, I will leave them on the slide at the end. But all the best for your meeting, and hopefully I'll get to Sharjah sometime in person.